Hello, and welcome to the FI Entrepreneur, Financial Planning for the Risk Taker. This podcast will show you how to achieve FI through entrepreneurial pursuits by developing a well-calibrated and thought-out plan for risk management so that you can maximize the rewards.
Hosted by certified financial planner, enrolled agent, and serial entrepreneur Ben Martinek, this is the FI Entrepreneur, Financial Planning for the Risk Taker.
The information presented in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. None of the content is presented as investment advice. Consult your financial professional before acting on any of the information presented in this show. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Ben and Deb co-hosting. We have a very interesting show for today. They're all interesting. This is like a form of gluttony, right? Who can't get enough of this topic? That topic being personality types. Aren't they just fascinating? I mean, these tests that we just see this advertising and banners like, go find out who you are. And you're like, oh, maybe I should take that. I'd be kind of curious to see what they think of me. That's what we're going to talk about today is personality types and these tests and the relevance that would have for financial independence and the relevance that has for entrepreneurship, with really a special focus on entrepreneurship today. What is the personality type of the entrepreneur, at least as defined by the Myers-Briggs test? We'll spend some time talking about that, and then we'll spend some time talking about Deb and I's personality, and ultimately what we think the relevance of this all is to you as the listener. What's the good, the bad, and the ugly of personality types? So Deb, why don't you go ahead and join us?
Thank you. So this is a very, very fun topic for me. When we were talking about this amongst our team members, another member of our team who has a very similar personality to mine said, oh, I could have a master's degree in personality tests. It is our own pursuit to want to know more of the common characteristics that seem to be present in yourself and in others. So back in my own college days, when I studied interpersonal relations, I was introduced to the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. Many of you have heard of that. It's probably taken on a multitude of different titles over the years. And we'll talk a bit about 16 personalities. That's the branding that we utilized for putting together this podcast. It's an opportunity to take a personality quiz or test or assessment. And in my exposure to this, it opened up a window for me to better understand myself. So as Ben mentioned, we'll share in a bit what each of our personalities are. And we used a popular website, 16 Personalities, to identify this. So
again, that's 16 personalities, 16personalities.com.
.com, 16, the number, not the word.
It was a fun test, so take you about 5 minutes.
So to provide a little background, these types of tests do provide an introspective self-report questionnaire that helps to indicate different preferences in how people perceive the world and make decisions. The tests attempt to assign 4 categories: introversion or extroversion, sensing or intuition, thinking or feeling, judging or perceiving. And then 1 letter from each category is taken to produce a 4-letter test result, such as INFJ or ENFP. Now, I'm not good at math, but the total number of unique categorical combinations does equal 16.
That makes sense.
So let's dive into the framework of what the differences are between each of these categories. So first, we'll consider the mind, how we interact with our surroundings.
As I think most of you know, you could either be introverted or extroverted. This one probably doesn't need a whole lot of explanation since it's so familiar to all of us, but simply it's where do you get your energy from? And, if you're feeling run down, how would you like to recharge yourself? Do you turn to other people as a source of finding your energy, or do you turn interiorly to yourself and need some down or alone time as a way to get your energy? Extroverts like to hang out with other people. They hit a rise out of hanging out with others. I, being an introvert, struggle with the concept of turning to other people as a way to recharge myself. Although I am an even mix, I think, pretty close to a 50-50 between extrovert to introvert. But I enjoy ultimately having my alone time, a little de-stressor, some time to myself. If it's been a hard week or a hard day, I want to sit in my couch or in my chair and read a book. And please don't interact with me. I need some downtime.
That's so true. And I am completely the opposite. I am very much an extrovert. I love being with people. So it's fun to know how opposites attract. It's very, very true. Now we'll consider how we see the world and process information. So the options here, we have observant or sensing individuals versus those who are intuitive. So observant individuals are people who are highly practical. They're pragmatic, they're down to earth. They tend to have strong habits and focus on what is happening or what has already happened. Versus intuitive people, they're very imaginative, they're open-minded, and they're curious. They prefer novelty over stability, and they focus on hidden meanings and future possibilities. I wonder if you could guess which ones we are, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
The next one would be discussing nature. Nature is being defined really as whether or not you're a thinking individual or a feeling individual. Thinking individuals focus on objectivity and rationality, logic, very rationally driven. They don't wear their heart on their sleeves necessarily. Their feelings aren't what drives their decisions. It's really what seems to make the most sense. Whereas feeling individuals are sensitive and emotionally expressive. They tend to be more empathic and only less competitive than the thinking types. I am certainly thinking. Deb is certainly feeling. This is a point of contention is probably too strong of a term, but just misunderstanding between the two of us. Deb would like me to just be more understanding, and I don't understand her. So
it's interesting when you take this personality test, it gives you the percentage on a scale of 0 to 100 of what you are for each of these different categories. And Ben was 78% thinking, and I was equally 78% feeling. So both of us do not have much on the other side of the spectrum when it comes to this category of looking at nature, how we make decisions and cope with emotions. So you can imagine that can cause some conflict whenever we have conversations or discussions, because I'm oftentimes led by my heart and Ben is not. Fourth, we're going to look at tactics, which reflects our approach to work, planning, and decision-making. So the two differences we have here are judging individuals versus prospecting individuals. Those who are judging are decisive, they're thorough, and they're very, very organized. They value clarity, predictability, and closure, and they much prefer structure and planning to spontaneity. Prospecting individuals, on the other hand, are very good at improvising and spotting opportunities. I just can't believe how accurate these are. It's so great. They tend to be flexible, relaxed, nonconformists who prefer keeping their options open. I know that you can't see me, folks, but I am raising my hand. I am so strongly a prospecting individual, and Ben is just shaking his head laughing.
Yeah, I am a planner at heart, so I'm in the right profession, I think, as a financial advisor, financial planner. I am all about judging, not judging others, but judging as defined here under tactics. Again, decisive, thorough, organized, thinking out ahead into the future. That's me.
And then finally, we look at identity. This is an additional aspect that's not typically included in the Myers-Briggs, that personality approach that's about 100 years old now. But within 16personalities.com, they added on this final component of identity. This is an aspect that underpins all of the others, showing how confident we are in our abilities and decisions. And so we've got two options here. We have assertive or turbulent. Assertive individuals are self-assured, even-tempered, and resistant to stress. They refuse to worry too much and don't push themselves too hard when it comes to achieving their goals. Versus turbulent individuals who are self-conscious and sensitive to stress. They are likely to experience a wide range of emotions and to be success-driven, perfectionist, and eager to improve. So we've got these 5 different categories. Most commonly, we look at the 4, are extrovert or introvert, intuitive or sensing, a thinker or feeler, judger or perceiver or prospector. So then 16personalities.com breaks down the combination of categories into 4 types. You've got analysts, diplomats, sentinels, and explorers. And then you can spend some time on that website taking a look and understanding where it is that you fall in one of those categories. But then within each of those types are subsets of 4 additional groupings based on the unique individual combination of traits. And one such unique combination is what 16 personalities took the liberty of nicknaming the entrepreneur personality. Individuals who are, drumroll, extroverted, sensing or observant, thinking, and prospecting.
Yeah, so what's interesting and grabbed our attention today for this podcast is, do you have to be an entrepreneur as defined by the Myers-Briggs test, one of these 16 personalities, in order to be an entrepreneur? I mean, are we all limited? Is all entrepreneurship limited to just the personality type of entrepreneur? I mean, if so, I think both Deb and I are going to have a little trouble because neither one of us technically have the entrepreneur personality. So let's take a moment here and just analyze what are those traits according to 16personalities.com that they assign to the entrepreneur. Let's see if we like them or agree or disagree with them. And then we're going to go pivot to ourselves and talk a little bit about Deb and I, our personality types, and how we've ultimately been using those to make it work for us as entrepreneurs. Again, as Deb just mentioned, the entrepreneur is by definition, or at least within the Myers-Briggs framework, extroverted, sensing, thinking, and prospecting. That means this person on the whole is confident and assertive. They're comfortable with risk. Kind of makes sense. An entrepreneur is a risk taker, so they better be comfortable with risk. They enjoy obstacles. They like seeing challenges. They see it as an opportunity, not setbacks. They are okay with making decisions and moving on. They're outgoing. They're involved. They're social. They volunteer in social settings. They don't hide away. They're not introverts. And they'd rather look at building models than looking at taking directions. They're not rule followers, according to this. They love plotting their own path, blazing their own trail. And, maybe people will follow behind them. Maybe they won't. Entrepreneurs aren't looking for affirmation necessarily from others, although still being highly social at the same time. So I don't know. What do you think, Deb? I mean, is an entrepreneur only someone who just loves to take action and plow ahead without much thought as to what they're doing?
I think it's true, having these particular characteristics in this personality trait, being extroverted, sensing or observant, thinking and prospecting, but I don't think it's limited to just that. I feel like this is a unique definition for the entrepreneur based on these personality traits, but in our own personalities, we experience some of these traits, even though we are not what 16 personalities would consider the entrepreneur. But it is helpful to know that these are kind of the decisive, definitive traits that you can see in a person that is plodding along this path of entrepreneurship. You're not going to see an individual typically that is just an extreme introvert. As much as I might be an extreme extrovert, an extreme introvert is not likely the type of person that's going to pursue entrepreneurial endeavors. And so I do agree with that extroversion tends to help when you're considering entrepreneurial activities.
Sure. Well, what about the sensing? It's sensing or intuitive, right? In terms of this combination, sensing is more pragmatic in nature, intuitive is more creative or unbounded. So this seems a touch interesting where in defining someone as sensing, we're suggesting that they aren't as creative. Do you think that's accurate?
I think it can be a both and. I think there are great strengths in both whenever it comes to entrepreneurship, because I myself, I'm very much an intuitive type of person, and having that ability allows me to read a situation well, I think. But then you have the sensing, and that there's a lot to be said about that. They have strong habits and a strong focus, and that is really a necessary component, I think, when you're on this hard drive of blazing your own path and making things your own in this pursuit of entrepreneurship.
It must be the business overtones, I think, in entrepreneurship, right? I mean, the business owner, whether you like it or not, you have to become this, is someone who makes decisions based on the numbers. And there isn't a component of idealism. There is just a component of practicality. We have certain costs, we have certain income. To make this work, we got to keep the two of these to ultimately be a profitable endeavor. Entrepreneurship does tend to have this element of pursuit of profit associated with it. And so I can see within an entrepreneur not allowing their minds to chase away with dreaming, but instead saying, look, we have to be held to the confines of what's going to make this be a profitable business endeavor. And I think it would probably be within that sense that we would give them a nod to sensing over intuition. But let's talk a little bit about the whole difference between thinking or feeling. So entrepreneurs, as defined here, again, prefer thinking over feeling. They're going to be objective, rational, prioritize logic. I suppose it seems consistent with what I was just saying about the business overtones. Would you expect an entrepreneur to be overly sensitive or emotionally expressive?
The way you say that just sounds so negative. but these are the differences. There's strengths and weaknesses in both. I do think just from our perspective in going in these different endeavors on the route and the path of entrepreneurship, that thinking is definitely a trait that is more to be prized in this realm. I am almost off the charts, as mentioned, 78% feeling, whereas Ben is 78% thinking. And so I can use a lot of creativity and express myself, but there's not a whole lot of logic sometimes when it comes to my own expression and desire to see things through. And so that's one thing that I appreciate very much about how Ben and I are opposite. And I think that rings so true when you consider the entrepreneur's personality, that this would be prized over feeling.
I think the last trait here that's interesting is this notion of judging versus prospecting. Again, judging are folks who are decisive, thorough, and highly organized, maybe an emphasis on organized and clarity. Whereas prospecting, which tends, as defined, seem pretty interesting for the entrepreneur. They're folks who are more about improvising, spotting opportunities. and tend to be flexible. And maybe within the confines of all that, also nonconformist, meaning they aren't necessarily rule followers or willing to do what the status quo is. So again, entrepreneurs are of this latter type, the prospecting individuals. I can see that. I mean, that seems to make sense to me as someone who's going to go and blaze their own path. You can't be looking to someone else really by definition as a means to do that. And I suppose trailblazing isn't necessarily something that's going to be an organized endeavor. It's adventurous, really. Maybe that is, if I were to try to capture in a single word, an entrepreneur and what this personality type is about. It's an adventure seeker. Perhaps we just say an adrenaline junkie. They're the person who just willing to just jump into it. They don't need order or clarity or a strong plan in their mind in order to plow ahead. They'll just improvise. So let's jump into it and see where things take us. And that seems pretty relevant. I am not a prospecting individual. I am not necessarily an adventure seeker. I am a risk taker, but I'm not necessarily an adventure seeker. I'm definitely more methodical in my approach on taking on risks. So I don't know, Deb. I mean, for you to be an entrepreneur or a risk taker for financial independence or for entrepreneurship, do we think they need to be someone who's just willing to just go, just leave it all behind and just see where things go as an adventure seeker?
I think there's such value in considering both of these components, these aspects in the realm of entrepreneurship. As a prospector myself, improvision and spotting opportunities is definitely something that I think I thrive on, almost to a fault and too much. Penn likes to say when I come up with an idea or a proposal, it's often like I'm asking for marriage when it's the first date because I just get so down this line of possibility. But I can see such value in having the judging component because it is more methodical and logical and looking more at things by the numbers, which is not something that I often consider. And so there's great value with both of them. I think an entrepreneur would be well to do to have aspects of both. Obviously, we're not going to be 50-50 down the line. I think an individual that'd be 50-50 down the line would be rather boring, actually, if you consider all of the 16 different types and you're just 50-50. I don't know if you'd be very exciting to be around. So it's nice to have some, the variety of these spectrums that you can find yourself on, but there are components of both that you will still have within you, whether you sway one way or the other.
For sure. So let's pivot now a little bit from entrepreneurs as defined, because again, what's fascinating about this, and I like the stereotype, or at least the suggestion that if you are going to be an entrepreneur, this is the type of person you need to be. There's definitely valuable characteristics as outlined for the person who's an extrovert, sensing, thinking, and prospecting. But that's certainly not me. I'm not an entrepreneur by definition. In case you want to know, who am I? And we'll talk about Deb in a moment. I suppose I'm defined as an architect, which I'm an introvert, intuitive, thinking, and then judging individual who's also assertive. So apparently, I don't know, they're flattering me, I guess. Kind of the fun thing about these personality types is like, oh, we found you. And they talk about your strengths and your weaknesses. Their own definition of me is it can be lonely at the top. So apparently it's a rare personality type. But I am in good company. Thank you, Elon Musk and Michelle Obama and Friedrich Nietzsche, of all people. Oh my. The philosophers out there will know who Friedrich Nietzsche is, maybe even the non-philosophers. So the introduction to the architect apparently is Blaise Pascal, who actually we'll have to reintroduce into our conversation because he's a big proponent into how we handle and measure up risk as first the mathematician who attempted to define probabilities. So Blaise is actually a fascinating study as well as a philosopher, but he was kind of caught up with this existential bent with man's feebleness and yet his greatness also lying in his ability to think. And so it's like we're this strange constitution of fragility and greatness all at once between our bodily and intellectual components. Anyhow, I am apparently an architect, which seems to suggest I'm good at organizing, thinking ahead, planning, being highly confident, a bit of a rule breaker, willing to plot my own path, but also aware of social consequences, perhaps one might say. I don't know, Deb, do you feel that this is relevant? Does this speak to me?
I love personality tests because I just feel like it gives such a good window into the soul of who you are, uniquely you. I could have the same personality type as somebody else, but I'm still unique in my own expression of it. And so, I've known Ben for so long now, but seeing this plotted out in his personality type as an introvert, intuitive, thinking, and judging. And that I want to just make a comment on this, that an architect or this personality type may struggle to find people who can keep up with their nonstop analysis of everything around them. I feel like that is such a good summary of you in a nutshell. There's always an analysis component of what is going on running through your brain, whether it's considering what groceries we're getting, fuel mileage, or what next steps strategic that we're going to be taking in our business as we continue to grow and move forward.
Yeah. So again, I'm an architect, not an entrepreneur. It's so fascinating. So do you have to be an entrepreneur by definition to be an entrepreneur? Well, obviously not. I think we're doing just fine for ourselves and we can find success amongst our different personality type. Just out of curiosity, Deb, so what's your personality type? Who have I married?
You have married the opposite of you, which is, I suppose, why that notion opposites attract exists. So based on 16 personalities, I'm a campaigner. I am an extrovert. I am intuitive. I am feeling, and I am prospective in my personality traits. So the summary that we have for the introduction of who is a campaigner: these people tend to embrace big ideas and actions that reflect their sense of hope and goodwill towards others. Their vibrant energy can flow in many directions. I'm not sure if I can find anything else that sums me up so easily as this definition here. As in one of my masterminding groups, our mentor was encouraging us to uncover our superpower. Like what if you were to be like a superhero in a comic book or whatever, what's your superpower? And the only thing that I could come up with was excessive enthusiasm and undying optimism. And I feel like that speaks so well to a person who has an ENFP, extroverted, intuitive, feeling, and prospecting personality trait. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, Deb's incredibly bubbly. If you haven't picked that up so far, it's just true. So, and Deb is one of the few people I have met in this life in which it doesn't matter who you are, you tend to get along with. I mean, she's just fun to be around and she's a good time. And it's not a very much of a quiet moment, both good and bad, but you would have a hard time having an awkward conversation with Deb. I just don't think it happens regardless of who you would be. And so I think everyone who comes in touch with Deb comes away as a better person, feeling energized and excited and optimistic about the future. It's simply in her DNA and her bones. I don't know if she could be someone else if she wanted to be.
And even though you don't understand it, I'm glad that you can appreciate it. Thank you, honey.
Yes. Well, I definitely don't understand it. But so let's pivot now maybe into entrepreneurship. Deb's a campaigner. I'm an architect. Neither one of us are entrepreneurs by definition, and yet here we are very much involved in entrepreneurial activities. Why are we bringing this up? I mean, what's the relevance to you as you're considering financial independence, especially through the pathway of entrepreneurship? A couple different things. One, it's just really good, I think, to have an understanding of who you are. Simple reality is we aren't the same. I don't think that's a newsflash to anybody, but we're not. I think it's interesting to see that we can be approximately categorized within these 16 definitions. But we need to appreciate both internally within ourselves, but also externally to other people, that how we perceive and understand and express ourselves or think of the world is just simply not the same. There isn't uniformity in this regard. Now, I don't know if that's to suggest that it's always relative amongst ourselves. This is a bit of the philosopher in me, and I'd be hesitant to call it all relativism. That's another conversation altogether. But we interact with each other. We can't all interact with the same people. If all I did was interact with architects, I think that'd be rather boring and actually probably harmful to my personality. I ultimately didn't marry an architect. I married a campaigner, and ultimately to my betterment. And so we need to know what ticks within us, and we ultimately need to strive to understand what ticks in other people so we can better approximate our strengths and our weaknesses. What is it that we do well, and what is it that we don't do quite so well? And without question, if you are going to go down the pathway of entrepreneurship or even just financial independence, part of this is knowing when you need help and when you don't need help. Where are you fine in your own regard, and where would you be better suited to delegate and have someone else give you assistance? And we just have to know our weaknesses. I think we lead with our strengths, but we have to be aware of our weaknesses. So what do you think, Deb?
Absolutely. And it's interesting in this concept of looking at financial independence and entrepreneurship and our own experience is that, if you're just starting out, as Ben and I were talking about before we started recording the podcast, as an entrepreneur, you're going to be wearing all of the hats for a very long time, which is a great opportunity to see what your strengths are, but also see where your weaknesses are. So then when you get to the point of being able to fortify your bench with a strong team, you can look at their personality type and see how they can fill in the gaps and vice versa. But when you're on this pathway, it can be a little lonely, a little challenging, character forming, as they would say. But when you're wearing all the hats and doing all the things, but realizing, oh gosh, I really did dread this component of our business or trying to push things forward in that way. And in our own experience, actually, when, I don't know, Ben had finished with a meeting or something, he had come upstairs and he was just a little stressed. Stress, which is managed typically very well for an architect, but I could just tell that something was weighing on him. What can I do to help? What's going on? And he realized in all of the development and the building, architecting this business is that he really struggled with the initial components of meeting with people and, taking them from prospect to client. And so me, being me, was like, well, this is a no-brainer. I should step into this role. And it's been a wild ride ever since, something that I've enjoyed immensely. And it just relieves a lot of that burden, I think, that Ben felt, because it's not naturally ingrained in him to enjoy that component of things. I was working with people, but not that initial get up and go. And I very much enjoy, I could talk to anybody. I think this is a great gift of gab that I inherited from my father. People would always say about him, he never knew a stranger. And I feel like that is definitely the case with me too. And so I was able to utilize the strengths of my personality to the betterment of our business and continuing forward in that trajectory.
That's right. As things develop in your entrepreneurial activity, hopefully we'll have to have a show dedicated to this, because you could only run a business entirely by yourself and just keep it that way and have the business be profitable. And quite frankly, there's nothing wrong with that. And in some ways, it's even idyllic. There's some weaknesses to that strategy. We'll talk about it further at a future podcast. But if you are going to expand and only bring on other team members and only have them to complement your strengths and weaknesses, you want to delegate and start to get some stuff off your plate. And probably the stuff that you should be getting off your plate is the stuff that you don't do particularly well. And I don't know if I would say I wasn't good at prospecting or meeting with folks. It just wasn't really a strength of mine. And Deb's just a people person. She's much better suited at that task. I'm better suited doing the financial advice that I deliver and the study of that and the planning and thinking ahead. Engaging someone who's thinking about services, it just wasn't really the thing that I wanted to dedicate my time and my energy towards. Deb loves to connect with people. Quite frankly, Deb would be horrible. I think as a plan, horrible is maybe a little harsh.
No, it's not too harsh. I would be horrible, guaranteed.
As a financial advisor, that's not why people are meeting with you, huh?
Never. No.
No, that's why Deb married me, I suppose. Yeah, so there you go. Deb's great at connecting with people at the beginning and helping them to see in our business whether or not that it's a good fit. But then it gets passed on to me, or then I play to my strength. And so whatever business that you are pursuing, the point being is we need you to be evaluating, especially as you come to that point where you're ready to hand some task off and you can afford to do so and it makes sense to do so. What are those tasks that you don't do really well? Let's be sure that we grab your personality in consideration, but we also grab the personality types of the other people that you're bringing on the team. Are they the right person for the work that you need them to be? And are they the right person to complement you? Just all the research that's being done in this strongly suggests is what you need to do. Like, it would be bad business management on your part to not take these factors into consideration. And, they're fairly easy to obtain. It's fairly easy to obtain this information. Many of these studies are offered inexpensively. Of course, there is always a premium package. So if you want to dig deeper, you can. And I don't think there's probably any harm in doing that. I think there's enough value that they're worth the cost. But even if you don't do that, you'll garner enough good information for this to be good for you and for your team, for your business, only good for your decision making, which I think is what a lot of this pulls back to. We want to be making high quality decisions. And this is one of those ways to do that.
It's been so much fun to discuss this between the two of us. Opposites attract in our own personality and characteristic traits. But as we draw this to a close, I want to share a quote from someone who I discovered via 16personalities.com, who shares the same personality makeup as myself. None other than the character Michael Scott from our favorite show, The Office. Truth be told, I'm not sure how I feel about our congruent personality type, but I'm going to run with it.
I'm not sure if I'm okay with it either, but I do love The Office, and Michael Scott's funny, and Steve Carell is the man. I like him as an actor, so we'll go with it.
Michael Gary Scott. So I'm going to run with it as my free spirit would lead me with my personality type. And this, just for the record, is my favorite quote of all time in all episodes of The Office, all 9 seasons. Michael can be heard as saying, "Would I rather be feared or loved? Easy, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me." Do you see what he did there? He harnessed what he saw within himself and projected that onto his interactions with others. Love what makes you, you.
I don't have anything to add to that. I love that line all the time from The Office. I'm going to make people, what is it? They're going to be afraid of how much they love me. Gosh, whoever came up with that line deserves to be paid a lot.
Probably an ENFP.
All right, folks, with that, we are going to wrap it up. Thanks for listening. I hope you found some value in this. Please check us out in the show notes and keep on tuning in. We love having you.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've had as much fun as we did. If you'd like to learn more about any of the subjects we spoke about, please visit our website for show notes, links, and more. Hit like, subscribe, or whatever button you've got in front of you to show some love. Remember, the information presented in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only.
Remember what Teddy Roosevelt said about the person who strives greatly. If he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Until next time, keep striving.
Thanks again, and be well.